maybe one of the great purchases in IPL auction history when you look at it, and when we look at it even 5-6 years down the line.
I've actually, as you were talking through that, actually was getting goosebumps through, because it is such an impactful moment for him, but also for the franchise. And you go into the auction ready to execute a strategy on building a really, really strong Indian core. And the first ball he faced, he stepped across and scooped the fast bowler bowling 135. It is a big question. I'll try and give away some elements without giving all the secrets. But the biggest reason is his hunger, his drive, his work ethic. He hits more balls than any player. He trains harder than any player. We sort of collaborated to come up with this, so the Royals Red Bull Speedster idea, which is finding the next fast bowlers in India.
So what does it take to make a successful IPL franchise? What is involved in the pre-auction strategy and how our teams run? We're going to find out today. I'm very excited to have with us on Spotify Conversations, Jake Lush McCrum. Jake is the Chief Executive Officer of the Rajasthan Royals. Under his leadership, the Royals have secured franchise acquisitions in the Caribbean and South African leagues. They've won 2 trophies in the last 2 seasons. He's also developed a cricket-leading analytics function, which I definitely want to get into. And he has enhanced the Royals partnership portfolio as well, bringing on global brands, including Red Bull. Apart from the Royals, he's a founding member of the Leaders Group Opus, which is focused on building new models of business and social progression. Jake, thank you so much for joining us today on Spotify Conversation.
Thanks, Pranav. It's a pleasure to be here, and I think you're the first person who's nailed my full name correctly on one of these things. So
I'm glad it's a good start then. I want to catch you. I'm catching you today on the day of the Eliminator, so you might be a little bit nervous. Firstly, congratulations on the season so far. It's been a fantastic run. So well done. But and that kind of leads me into my first question. And it's kind of $1 million question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Is how does one create a successful IPL franchise? Because I'm looking at the Royals' journey, and it's kind of been a bit up and down over the last few years. I mean, in 2019, the Royals came 7th out of 8 teams. In 2020, you were last with 8th out of 8 teams. 2021, again, 7th out of 8. And then suddenly we saw a major turnaround in the team. In 2022, you were runners-up. 23, you just missed the playoffs. And of course, you've had a good season this year. So just to understand, what are you guys doing differently in the past few years? Because it's a pretty significant jump and turnaround. And why is this working for you?
Yeah, so it is a big question. I'll try and give away some elements without giving all the secrets. But I think if you look back to 2018, now the challenge was with that big auction, all the other franchises were able to retain 3 players and right to match 2 players in the auction. So they each had a core squad of 5 high-quality players. We could only retain 1 and right to match 1 or 2. And so we were at an immediate disadvantage there in terms of the majority of the quality Indian players weren't in the auction because they've been retained. And other franchises could build their core, whereas we were trying to find the people in the auction who'd not been signed previously or had newly entered or otherwise. So that basically led to the next 4 years being quite challenging, because if you don't have the best squad in the league to start with, you're then always at a disadvantage. Now, of course, we tried to do some interesting trades. We developed players through the off-season, but because we couldn't get that Indian core from year one, overseas availabilities, all of these things have an impact. And so that's why you see that 2018 to 2021 sort of cycle going as it was. We still felt we had a good team, but when you have Ben Stokes getting injured on the first match of the season, you have Josh Butler leaving because of a pregnancy, you have Joffrey getting injured, we had a team built around overseas, whereas success is a team built around Indian players.
Indian players, yeah.
And so coming into 2022, we then could retain players we developed through that, through those 3 to 4 years. So Yashasvi Jaiswal we could retain, Sanju Samson, who'd obviously been consistently with us, we could keep within the system. And so you start building this, and obviously Josh Butler as well, you start building this quality core that's been there for 3 to 4 years, who understands the Royals way, who understands and have a deeper connection to the franchise. And you go into the auction ready to execute a strategy on building a really, really strong Indian core. And so Ravi Ashwin, Yuzvendra Chahal, we were very happy to secure both. I think we went in probably wanting to get one of them, and we came out with both of them. We got Prasid Krishna, who of course has been injured the last couple of years, but was outstanding in that 2022 season. Yeah. And then we got some quality players who we developed over the next 3 to 4 years: Dhruv, Jurel, Riyan, Parag, and others. So I think the idea was in the 4 years previously, we were frustrated because we had to develop that Indian core versus being able to buy it in the first year. So we were a couple of years behind. 2022, we could actually acquire some really experienced quality Indian talent while seeing all that development work coming to fruition on players like Jaiswal, Dhruv, Jurel, Riyan, Parag, and others. So I think it's a combination of the two. I think we've also had continuity in leadership. If you look through those 2018 to 2021 years, we had different captains, we had different coaches. For the last 4 years, we've had the same captain and same coach. And so that's a massive impact, that continuity at the top. And line leadership is the single most important factor for success, right? And you see that's why Chennai have been so successful over the last 17 years, is they've had aligned leadership throughout. So that's been something we've definitely taken on board. I think the development of Sanju Samson as a captain, we knew when we made him captain 4 years ago that, like everyone, they have areas to develop, but the way in which he's proactively done that, the way in which he's, worked on himself, his approach, bought into whether it's the analytical development or the leadership training or other elements, has been fantastic. He's got brilliant EQ, and so he really understands how the different players are feeling, their cultural backgrounds, how to manage them. So I've been delighted to see his sort of upward trajectory as a leader in the setup. And Sanga's brought that calm, clarity, and for someone so successful, he doesn't have an ego. And that's an amazing trait to have as a leader. And so those two have formed a really strong partnership and combination, which has helped us drive this success.
Yeah, it's actually been a fantastic run to see the change over the years. Now, take me back, because I think you mentioned it a few times, but one of the most exciting things, I think, in sports, not just cricket, is the IPL auction. It's unique. You don't see it in any sport. And for us fans, we watch it on television, but take us behind the scenes of the IPL auction, because there is, of course, a lot of strategy that goes on into it. How do you prepare as a team for auction day? How do you work out the strategy? Is there a money ball effect that goes into it? I know you've developed an analytical function. So how much of it is pure science? Because on auction day, and we've watched it, I mean, emotions can get in the way. You have that paddle in your hand and it becomes sometimes an ego battle, and at times you have to pass and at times you have to bid a little more. So take us behind that. How do you prepare, and who makes the final call on that day?
So I personally love the auction. I think it's firstly, it's a fascinating couple of days. There's not many occurrences where you're spending $10 million on X number of assets in that time. And it can have such a variable sort of impact on your next 3 seasons, really, when it's the big auction. And so that's why we've invested heavily in analytics, because we think it gives us a better judge on the quality of a player, which helps us make better decisions, right? So a lot of people talk analytics data. It is all about better decision making. And so being able to value a player more effectively means you can allocate your purse more effectively, which means you can build a stronger squad, which helps you win more matches. And our strength has been not getting emotionally attached to certain players we have to buy, not having to win someone because they're that player. It's okay, once they stretch out of that element, we know we can get this player, and we might actually get them undervalued, which enables us to get 2 players. And so I think if you see in that 2022 auction, someone like a Deepak Chahar, we pushed up quite high, but once it got to a certain stage, we said, look, we can actually probably get a couple of high quality players here. There's enough value left. It takes 14 crores of someone else's purse, and then we could adjust and get, I think it was Riyan who came up after, and Uzi as well. So, that agility is really important. We of course have a decision tree. We of course have sort of detailed valuation models on these players. That you have to stick with that strategy, and there can be stress around it. You miss a player, and then it's like, oh God, are we going to miss them all? How do we adjust it? But thankfully 2022 went well. Thankfully we were able to be agile within it. And again, in terms of final decision, it is a collaborative sort of play in a sense. Manoj obviously has the paddle, so he has the final. Yes, I'm going to go ahead and bid this. And then you've got, Sangha from a cricket side and myself from a sort of more commercial lens working together on it, just making sure we've got the right soundboards to make the right decisions and ensure we stay unbiased and ensure we stay sort of neutral and focused around the decision tree. So we've got your analytics feeding in both sides basically to give the best possible outcomes. So it's fun. I think when other teams, do bring, might get overly passionate about a player, then it actually leaves an opportunity for us to get some undervalued players elsewhere. So we want that to remain in the auction because it gives some opportunities for us. I think the auction as an event can get even bigger. It was brilliant that the BCCI got crowds into the last auction in Dubai. I'd love to see live entertainment. Could there be interviews on the table so that the fans are really close to the action? Could there be, more fan to table to, player interactions? Can we get cameras around all the top players who you're going to get signed up? Cameras at the families' homes, so you're seeing those live reactions, having them on the big screen as the bidding's going on. You can just add all these dynamics in, which can make it into an amazing show like the NFL draft does.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So we can learn a lot from there. And I just think the level of passion here is another level. And so I know BCCI are working through plans around it. We're, as franchises, all supporting with ideas to help elevate that event. But there's no reason that event itself can't have as many viewers as, some of the biggest IPL matches, because you're seeing lives change. And it's a privileged position to be in to impact that change. A Yashasvi Jaiswal going from having nothing to suddenly having 2.4 crores and being as part of the franchise.
Yeah.
It is one of the most motivational elements of the job, seeing the impact on these players' lives.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Jaiswal because that was my next question. Jaiswal is my favorite story in sports, not cricket. Favorite story in sports over the last few years, from where he was sleeping on cricket fields in Mumbai to signing a contract with the Rajasthan Royals. It's incredible. But take me back to that auction, because it was 2020. Not a lot of people, knew of his real potential. You signed him for 2.4 crores and you sneaked in there right at the end. I remember watching that auction. KKR thought they had him in the bag, and suddenly you showed up and swooped him, which, I mean, maybe one of the great purchases in IPL auction history when you look at it, and when we look at it even 5-6 years down the line, maybe one of the best gems ever purchased. So what did you see in Jaiswal? How did you spot that talent? Because I think in your first year, I think he played only 3 matches. It was really only in 2023 when he took it to the next level, and today he's representing India in the World Cup. So what did you guys see back then?
I've actually, as you were talking through that, actually was getting goosebumps through, because it is such an impactful moment for him, but also for the franchise, as you rightly highlighted. Got to give a huge amount of credit to Zubin Barucha, our director of high performance. He'd actually spotted him a couple of years before, and the year before that we wanted to sign him, but he'd not played a domestic state match, and because he was of the age he was, you have to play a domestic first class game to go into the auction. And so we were actually quite frustrated we couldn't sign him the year before. So when it got to signing him this year, he'd hit a couple of double centuries in domestic first class. So we were like, okay, his price has come from 20 to 2+, which again is part of the dynamics of the auction and all the rest of it. However, Zubin had such confidence in his capability. And as much as we've got an analytics capability that's unbelievably strong, for players like Jaiswal, there wasn't enough data to make a decision of that value on it. Now, of course, the data can support it. We can see, how good a season he's had, but that's still very thin data. And so, there were a lot of trials that we held with him. He was actually one of the first players I met in 2017. So we signed him, a few years later, but he was at our trials then. And the first ball he faced, he stepped across and scooped a fast bowler bowling 135. That's his first ball at the trial. That sort of fearlessness, that rawness, that drive was like incredibly impressive. Now, Zubin obviously saw all the technical aspects. He's not, let's just say we're not surprised by the level Yash has got to because of actually how Zubin and the team saw him back then. We always saw this potential. In the first year, he had to adjust to the T20 game. That's why he didn't play as many matches. He played a lot of 50-over stuff with the under-19s. And he had to go through a full cultural transformation as well in terms of personality, actually giving back to the team. Because when you're a young kid who's been on the Maidans, you have to only focus on yourself. And it's completely understand that's how you survive. And so he came from that survival setting to that team environment. And I think that's something that we were able to do very well as a group, was actually over time slowly develop him and get him to have a deeper understanding of the importance of giving back to your teammates, giving back to the entire group. Romy Binder, our team manager, spent a lot of work. Zubin himself spent time, myself, Manoj, the entire leadership group are invested in that sort of player development process. We took him across to the UK. We got him to spend time with business leaders within our UK tech entrepreneurial ecosystem. We took him to different academies. We gave him exposure to, just going on a boat in Cornwall with some locals and having some Cornish pasties. All of these just small things that just open his eyes to the broader world and make him see the bigger picture and how big this ecosystem is that's supporting him and how much he's giving back to it as well. And so you see that maturity building through. The amount he now gives to the entire setup is huge. The amount of interactions we have during the off season. Whenever he has a gap, he comes to our high performance center in Nagpur with Zubin. Whenever he's in Mumbai, we catch up. Whenever he's in London, he'll catch up with Manoj. So he's very, very deeply connected to the franchise. But he knows that we're the best place for him to get into the Indian side, to have continued cricket success, and to take away all the distractions in his life, whether it's financial, personal, investment, all of that stuff. We give him great advisors. He gets to choose. We have him, but it's like, here are 3 guys we trust. Yash, you choose who you want to work with. And so that takes all the distractions away of his life, helps him focus purely on cricket, and is a reason he's had such good success. But the biggest reason is his hunger, his drive, his work ethic. He hits more balls than any player. He trains harder than any player. And that's that sort of survival fight instinct that he's got, which has been so amazing to watch.
His story just got better for me because I think it's just fantastic. Firstly, I think to congratulate the organization for spotting that difference and helping develop as an individual. Because I think that people are only concerned about runs and people are only concerned about performance on the field, but they're all connected. And without that development, you guys spotted it. So it's just fantastic. And it leads me to my next question, which, Jake, I'd love your insight on. There is a lot of belief in sport that it's not just talent that wins championships, but it's also a culture and a team culture that wins championships. And so I want to ask you about a winning culture. There's a belief that, the culture will impact your on-field performance. Examples are the 70s and 80s Western East side, the 90s and early 2000s Australian side, but also teams like, when you look at franchises like, even in football, you look at Manchester United under Sir Alex Ferguson. There was a culture of the team which leads to belief. Now, when you take the IPL, it becomes a little bit of a challenge, especially when you have a mega auction, you have a churn in players. So my question is, how do you set the culture? And you talked about it a little bit where you talked about the Rajasthan Royals way and the way we are. So how do you set a culture in a short period, because you have players really coming together only for a short period of time? And how does one maintain that over the years with the changing core group?
It's a good question, and one of the most challenging ones, I think, to manage. And the key is trying to keep continuity in that core group. So as much as there are 3 or 4 year cycles, maintaining the core of your core group of players and your leadership through that period is integral. So again, going back to Chennai, they've kept that core group of players and that leadership aligned over the last 15 years. We've managed to do that over the last 6 years, I'd say. And you're seeing the positives from that coming to fruition in the last 3. But I think aligned leadership is one. And without that, it's very difficult to have success. But 2 is that continuity. And so, we're focusing on our Indian core. We spend a huge amount of time and money on our players during the off season at the high performance center, working with Zubin, working with the entire setup. And that's all because we think we can make massive progress in their development year on year. as I said before, it gives them the motivation to sort of actually stay with us as a franchise, because it gives them the best chance of their cricketing success. So I think that all drives the culture. The fact that you're there for the players 365 days of the year. When they get an injury, we're there to support them. When they're about to go off and play for India, we're there and we offer camps for them. So even if they're at the NCA, we offer support additionally from our side. I think that entire ecosystem drives the culture, which drives success. Once a player knows you're going to give everything to them, they'll give everything back. And when you have that aligned leadership and continuity of leadership, anyone new who comes into the setup actually just sort of molds into that ecosystem. So if you look at the last few years, thankfully, because we had a good 2022 auction, not many changes have happened in the team. And, you know, we made a couple of good trades, getting Avesh Khan across this year. And he's just fit so nicely into the culture. He's got amazing energy, great dancer, very funny guy as well. You know, Nandre Berger, another one who's come in this year and brought some great energy and positivity in. So I think the culture brings the best out of the people you sort of add into it as well. And that's driven from the leadership, driven from the core. And these young guys, Riyan, Parag, Dhruv, Jurel, Yash, they drive a lot of that energy in the culture. And it's very rare to have three young Indian sort of players, three young Indian batters who are in some instances sort of competing for India spots, but so passionate about each other's success and so supportive. And, you know, during the IPL season, so happy for each other. You know, when Yash got in the team and Sanju got in the team, but Dhruv wasn't in, but he was just delighted for those two getting into the India side and knows that we're going to keep developing him to get there as well. So it is rare, I'd say, in such a franchise world to have that sort of camaraderie and alignment, but blimey, it's there and it's amazing to see.
Yeah, well, kudos to you guys, because you're right. It gets very competitive. And, you know, the day the team was announced, I'm sure there were a lot of anxious players across the country to see if they made the cut. So just being happy for each other's success, I think kudos to you guys for achieving that. The other thing that I wanted to actually ask you about, which is very interesting to me, is that the IPL is a long tournament. You need to balance and engage players who are away from their families or even away from their home countries. How do you manage this? Because a lot of times there are long gaps between games. And with the amount of travel, I know that COVID had a big impact on the mental health of a lot of athletes, dealing with isolation. Thank God we're done with that. But how do you deal with the mental health of players, keeping them mentally focused and engaged over a pretty long season and in 40-degree heat?
Yeah, I think it was 45 yesterday here in Ahmedabad. Again, another very good question. And you, of course, have your classical ways. So you've got your sports psychologist and sort of mental performance coach supporting the guys. You also have sort of all other individuals within the setup helping, whether it's through events, whether it's through, education opportunities, whether it's through the foundation, different touch points through the season to keep them both connected to the deeper purpose, of the franchise and of what we can achieve here with the platform of the IPL. So we did an amazing trip to our foundation site in Rajasthan. The players got to actually see the impact of their donations. They got to work with the women on the ground. They got to see the solar panels they've installed. Is the word. Blimey, it's a match day.
Yeah,
you get to see the solar panels they've installed on the roofs, and it's understanding the impact of that. Right, one solar panel powers a home. What does that mean? It means electricity. What does that mean? That means that a phone can be charged at home rather than walking 2 hours to charge a phone. That means that the payments can be done at home. That 2 hours can then be done earning, which then gives the household greater income, which then enables them to get greater education for the kids and to help the next generation. So that whole sort of value chain of a donation, when you play a Pink Promise Impact match, and players know that for every 6, we're going to install 6 solar panels across homes. Initially, it sounds great, but what does that really mean? Well, each home powered is basically 10 people powered, and the multiplier effect of that is another 10. So you're actually impacting thousands and thousands of people just through the power of electricity and light. And again, it has that sustainable core to it, which is really core to what we want to achieve. So I think, again, touch points like that through the season really help. The sports psych is crucial, the mental performance coach. And actually we had our mental performance coach spend 5-6 days in the athlete performance center in Austria with Red Bull to actually take some of the learnings from the Red Bull ecosystem and bring them into the Royals ecosystem. And again, that shared learning piece from our partner network is important on the high performance side. It's important on the marketing side. And openly, Red Bull as a partner ticks all of those boxes. So being able to, Sanga visited, I visited, our director of analytics has visited, mental performance coach has visited, being able to see how with top athletes from different sports, they're able to leverage all these different elements to help them perform better under pressure, to help them recover better. We can bring all those insights into the IPL, which is incredibly valuable. So, when you look at partnerships, we always say we're not a visibility play brand. We're all about all the additional elements of a partnership that can add value to both of the brands together. And Red Bull is one of those brands that provides so many benefits. And I think that multi-sport aspect is something underappreciated. What learnings can you take? I think they talked to me about how their basketball players took learnings from their skateboarders because of the way they could elevate on their jumps, because of the way their quads were developed. Actually, they could take that through into basketball, or they could take that through into the high jump or whatever. So I found that fascinating when I visited the APC in Austria. And what we want to do over time is take more of those learnings from the APC into our high performance center in Nagpur. So we've got the best possible development ecosystem for our players.
So actually, it's interesting you mentioned Red Bull, because that was my next question. As you drink some Red Bull over there, Jay, Red Bull, it's very interesting, your partnership, because you don't really see that with a lot of brands. There are sponsors that come in and say, okay, here's some money and put my logo on your t-shirt. And then you have Red Bull, which is kind of revolutionizing the way brands engage with sports. Whether in terms of scouting talent, development of the talent, you touched upon it a little bit, and also developing the sport at a rural level. So can you share a little bit about, the Royals' relationship with Red Bull and how they have helped you, not just as a brand in terms of visibility, but even in terms of scouting talent, developing talent, and helping develop the game?
It's been actually a long and very fun journey. So it started back in 2018, 2019. And it started just as a pouring partnership, just to get to know each other as a brand. And actually there's a guy working for Red Bull called Chris. And the amazing connection was when we were first in a meeting together, we actually asked the question, firstly, why don't you go with, because in 2018, we weren't having the success, we're having now on the field. And so we said, why don't you go with a Mumbai? And Bhaskar, the CEO, said, because your focus is on developing talent, your focus is on giving players wings. And that resonates really strongly with us. And we said, we love that, because before the IPL in 2006, 2007, we had a show called Cricket Star, which was finding the next best talent across India. It was a big TV talent show. And actually, some of the top performers from that ended up playing in the IPL for Rajasthan Royals, which was is an amazing story still. And people actually forget about that. But what's more amazing is Chris was sat in the room and he went, I was actually part of that show in 2007. I was actually one of the bowlers who was competing in the show. And hence he'd always had a deep connection with the franchise because he saw that passion for finding and developing talent. And people always say Royals are only focused on young talent. We do, of course, have some brilliant young players in Riyan, in Yash, in Dhruv and others. But we develop talent in all ages. How do we make a Ravi Ashwin, even better? How do we get a Yuzvendra Chahal to another level? How do we transform the career of a Shane Watson, a Jimmy Faulkner? Our passion is developing talent, giving them the best platform to perform. And so that connection with Red Bull was seamless. So we started off working together, started off doing some of these talent hunts, working with Red Bull Campus Cricket, giving those college players that incentive that, if they do well, they could be part of our trials, they could be net bowlers within our ecosystem. And then over time, we worked on the content side, some incredible jersey launches, jumping out of an aeroplane when the COVID bubble was on into Dubai to give us our jerseys. A stunt bike rider jumping off the roof of our Jaipur stadium, literally jumping off the roof of the stadium onto some cardboard boxes on the ground. And I spoke to Chris and he said it was the most nervous he's ever been in his life watching this The biker who was riding, he said actually this was one of the most nervous times he's been in. He called his wife and kid beforehand, and was like, I'm about to do it. I love you. But the content is just incredible in it. There's a lot of clutter sometimes around IPL content, but blimey, this cuts through it all. And then moving to sort of the scouting and development piece, we sort of collaborated to come up with this, so the Royals Red Bull Speedster idea, which is finding the next fast bowlers in India. And the reason behind this is, obviously there's 1.5 billion Indians. There's an incredible sort of supply of talent, but particularly bowlers who can go on an incredible growth curve, where if you've got that raw pace, they can be refined and developed over a couple of years to be at an IPL level. Batters needs a lot more time. You need to hit a lot more balls. It needs a lot more development. So given Red Bull's all about speed, it's all about giving wings. And we saw a gap in the talent funnel that actually we can find some incredible players. They might be playing tennis ball, cricket, that we can then develop over time. We said, let's double down on the speedster element. And so we've got scouting going on right now across the country to find the next best fast bowlers. We've had multiple in our net bowler group from the speedster ecosystem who've been working with us. We had one which we actually tried to buy a couple of years ago, but got bid out of in the auction. You can't get everyone you want. But again, the proof of concept that we're finding and developing top talent that can be IPL level is evident. And so we're going to continue expanding that over time. This year, I think, is 50% bigger than it was last year in terms of the search within Speedster. Campus cricket, again, continues this year. And I think the finals are just after the IPL. Again, working with a partner that we can leverage to increase that supply of talent. We can add that quality of both the scouting element, the development element, and the excitement element for the players involved, which means you increase that top of funnel supply. It works incredibly well together. And again, it's working with a brand with the same mindset, with the same focus. And then again, seeing that success on the field, that's really, really important. So those are the sort of scouting development pieces. I think the APC we're going to do a lot more with over time. We hired a guy called Michael Italiano, who had been working with Red Bull in F1 previously. So again, he deeply understood the Red Bull ecosystem. He already had relationships with the APC. He could bring all of those learnings into the Royals.
Just so our viewers understand, the APC is the in Australia.
I thought you were going to say it.
No, sorry.
It's the Athlete Performance Center in
Austria. Yeah.
Which is incredible, very picturesque. But it's the simplicity with which they work, which is also very helpful to see. Everyone thinks Athlete Performance Center Red Bull, it's going to be 100 acres, it's going to be all of this complexity. And actually, they say, you've got to get the simple things right. And first thing is getting the right people, right? If you don't have the right people, it doesn't matter what technology you have, it's not going to be implemented. And so that's why actually hiring someone to lead that medical function for us, the athletic performance function in Michael, was a really important hire post last season. And he's brought in brilliant insights, great managerial capabilities. And I think that area is going to go from strength to strength. And again, because he understands how the Athlete Performance Center at Red Bull works, because he's seen all of those elements being implemented in F1, he can bring across the best to IPL. Cricket can learn a lot from multiple other sports. And again, we're keen to bring brilliant people in who can help drive us forward. So there's a bit of Red Bull in every part of the franchise, actually. And it's helping drive us forward. And we're seeing great success because of it.
Well, it's great to see a brand that helps not just with throwing commercials in our face, but also helps with the development of sports. Because as a sports fan, anyone that helps develop sports, you automatically, get to like that brand and want to engage with that brand. So it's fantastic. Jake, thank you so much for the time that you've given us today. I know it's match day today. I want to wish you and the Royals all the best for your match today against RCB, and tremendous success in the future. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you. And hopefully if we do make it to Chennai, you can come along and watch the finals with us.
I would love to. Thank you. All the best, and we'll talk to you soon.
Super. Thank you.
Thanks.